Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. I am again your teacher, Miss John Zaril P. Pangan, and I think already all of you here already know na our class for today is online due to some reasons. So, nabi wala nalipay nga wala klase. Wala. Okay, that's good to hear. So, before we start our lesson for today, kindly make your own prayer na lang. Okay, so good afternoon again, everyone. So, our subject for today is Math 025 Advanced Statistics, and as you can see obviously in our presentation, our topic for today is about the Kruskal-Wallis test. But before that, let us all read our lesson objectives for today. Okay, so our learning objective for today is to test hypothesis using the Kruskal-Wallis test. Okay, so next, okay, by the way, I prepared an activity, but I guess we won't be able to perform this today because this activity requires a physical interaction. So I guess we will just jump on to our abstraction. We will no longer perform our activity and analysis. Okay, so now let's move on to our abstraction. So first, let us know what is Kruskal-Wallis test. The Kruskal-Wallis test is used to determine whether the population medians of three or more independent random samples are equal. It is less strict in that it does not require that the population be normally are all equal. Moreover, it is a test in which the original data from three or more independent samples are transformed into their ranks. To test hypothesis, we will follow the 5 steps. So, ang Kruskal-Wallis is testing hypothesis sa tulo or more na independent samples. Okay, so here we have an example. So, let us all read. The U.S. Small Business Administration publishes the number of small businesses in medium-sized cities. We are interested in testing whether the population median's number of small businesses per city is the same in Florida, North Carolina, and Texas. For the following small businesses per city is the same in Florida, North Carolina, and Texas. Use the Kruskal-Wallis test with the level of significance alpha level is equal to 0.05. Okay, so in this example, how many are our samples? Okay, so we have three. We have three samples, which are the Florida city, North Carolina, and the Texas city. Okay, so step 1, we need to state the hypothesis. So we have here our null hypothesis and our alternative hypothesis. So for our null hypothesis, we have the population median's numbers of small businesses per city are all equal. And for our alternative hypothesis, not all the population median's numbers of small businesses per city are all equal. So what have you noticed? Di ba usually sa null hypothesis kay no or not? Thirdly, not all population median are all equal. Why? Because according to definition, in null hypothesis, the independent samples all have the same central tendency and therefore came from same population. While in alternative hypothesis, at least one of the independent samples does not have the same central tendency as the other samples and therefore originates from a different population. Okay, so null hypothesis is ang tanang samples are equal, pero sa alternative hypothesis, at least isa ang dili equal. Okay, so now after we state our hypothesis, we can now find our critical value, which is our step 2. So as what I've said earlier, we have three samples: the Florida city, North Carolina city, the Texas city. And in this table, you can also see the number of small businesses per city. Okay, so after we identify how many are our samples, we can now use the formula of getting the degrees of freedom. So K stands for our number of samples. So that is why 3 minus 1 is 3. So our degrees of freedom is equal to 2 on our alpha level, and the given problem is 0.05. Okay, so since we have now our degrees of freedom, we can now find our critical value using the chi-square distribution table. So, the TF there stands for degrees of freedom. So, di ba, atong degrees of freedom ganina is 2. So, we have here the 2 and our alpha level is 0.05. And the intersection will be the critical value, which is 5.99. So, that is now our critical value. Okay, so now we have our critical value. So let us now move on to step 3, which is to find the value of test value or our age statistics. And first thing we're going to do is to combine the data and get the ranks. The table is shown in the right. So the first column shows the combined three cities of North Carolina, Texas City, and Florida City. And the second column shows the number of small businesses, and as you can see, it is ranked from lowest to highest. Okay, so after we rank all the city, we have to sum up the ranks for each sample. So in Florida City, we have here R sub 1 is equal to 7 plus 11 plus 13 plus 14 plus 16 plus 17 and plus 18, which is equal to 96. And for North Carolina, we have here the R sub 2, which is equal to 31, and for Texas City, which is our R sub 3, which is equal to 44. So next is we have to get the n of every sample. So ihapon lang nimo ang tanan nga city, tanan nga city ang nasa Florida. So for Florida City, there are 7 cities, and for North Carolina, there are 5 cities, and for Texas cities, there are 6 cities. So for Florida City, that would be our n sub 1, and for North Carolina will be our n sub 2, and Texas City will be our n sub 3. So our n will be equal to 7 plus 5 plus 6, which is equal to 18. Okay, so kindly take note all the value because we're going to use that for our formula later. Okay, so now we are already in step 3, which is to find the value of test value or our age statistics. So the formula for getting the age statistics is equal to 12 over n times the quantity of n plus 1 times the quantity of r sub 1 squared over n sub 1 plus r sub 2 squared over n sub 2 plus r sub k squared over n sub k minus 3 times the quantity of n plus 1. Okay, so now it's time to substitute. So 12 there is a constant number, and the n is kato ang sum sa tanan nga cities sa Florida, North Carolina, o Texas. Dayon, kanang 19 is, ang nag-i-add lang nimo ang 18 sa 1. Tapos, kanang 96 is mo na siya ang sum sa tanan ranks sa Florida City. Then, ang kanang over 7 is mo na siya ang kung pila kabuk ang city under Florida. Then, ang 31 is under sa North Carolina, ang sum yapon sa ranks over the 5 kung pila kabuk city under North Carolina. Then, ang 44 is ang sum sa mga ranks, tapos ang 6 is kung pila kabuk ang city under sa North Carolina. Then 3 again is a constant, tapos ang n is katong sample nga 18 na adan siya sa 1. So the final answer would be approximately 7.261. So therefore our age statistics or our test value is equal to 7.261. So as you've noticed, natay 3 dots which indicates infinity sign because according sa definition sa Kruskal-Wallis test, it is about 3 or more samples. That is why pwede siya moabot sa 3 pataas. Okay, since we already have our H value or our test value and our critical value, we can now make our decision, which is our step 4 of the process. So, we can obviously see na our H value is greater than our critical value. So, basically, our decision would be, we will reject the null hypothesis. Also, we have to note that if the H statistics is greater than or equal the critical value, then we will reject the null hypothesis. And if the H statistic is lesser than the critical value, then do not reject the null hypothesis. That is why we've rejected the null hypothesis here, because our H value is greater than the critical value. Okay, so now we are already in the last step, which is to summarize the result under step 5. After making the decision, we can now summarize our result, which says that there is enough evidence that not all the population medians numbers of small businesses per city are equal for Florida, North Carolina, and Texas. Okay, so are there any clarifications? If none, so that we can proceed to our assessment. Okay, so for our assessment, I have here a given problem. Just read it na lang and kindly put your answers in a one whole sheet of paper and just submit it to our GC. And for your assignment, kindly read and study lesson 14 in advance. And I guess that is all for today. Goodbye.